Well, howdy again there, folks. My name's Devin Moore. My friends just call me Moore. Welcome to the surprising third episode of the Fireside Chat, an episode I didn't think would be putting out so quickly. Unfortunately for me, my YouTube channel seems to have picked up a bit more of the right-wing influencer manosphere than I originally thought I was going to get this quickly. You see, previously, what I would have happen is I would go to people I know, folks I care about, friends, family, workers, or co-workers, I should say, and I'd ask them where they get some of their information, and normally they reiterate the same talking points. Now, I'm seeing the direct source of some of those talking points. And I think it's important that we address some of these directly in a much more controlled format, just so I can reiterate stuff that I said in my second episode. Now, as you can see on your screens before you, we have a gentleman by the YouTube channel name of the Y Minutes. Now, the first thing we're going to notice is that he is a handsome son of a bitch, and I will not deny him that. However, it's the content he's putting out that I have a bit of a problem with. So let's go ahead and watch for a second.
Why did Trump win the 2024 election, and how did he secure the biggest victory for any Republican in a generation?
So, again, I cannot deny the fact that Trump won. Obviously, I live in reality. But I want to immediately point out is that he is painting this as a massive, massive victory for Donald Trump, and not the narrow margin that it was in reality. So, real quick, let's look at the numbers. There is no doubt that this election was indeed an anomaly compared to the previous two presidential elections. As we can see, Donald Trump did win a majority of the voters. However, it is important to note, he did not win a majority of all voters. He won 49.8% of the popular vote. Did he win the popular vote? Absolutely. I cannot deny that fact. Is this a massive shift in the American populace? There's no way to tell that. But what you're having is people will see a red screen full of states and not bother to look at the nuance behind that. For example, he won Michigan by simply 0.5 percentage points. Kamala Harris was close there. In fact, Kamala Harris ran similar numbers that Joe Biden did in the 2020 election. Again, Donald Trump still won by the smallest margin in the past 30 years of presidential elections. Even Hillary Clinton won her popular vote margin by a larger amount than Donald Trump won in this election. It's important we remember that, because when they engage in hyperbole, they are not doing it to better engage in the conversation. So, but let's allow this gentleman to speak a bit more.
Now, on paper, the outcome of this election isn't totally surprising. Polling, in fact, did give Trump about a 50-50 shot at winning, but it was the sheer scale of the victory that caught the country off guard.
Country was caught off guard, yes, but as we've discussed, the scale is not the actual extent. What you see in the headlines is not everything that's in the story.
Won every swing state in the country, some by pretty big margins. He also became the first Republican in a generation to decisively win the popular vote.
He did win the popular vote. Is it decisively, though? I will let you be the judge of that. You could argue it, well, certainly, but is it a decisive victory when you have not even won 50% of the popular vote?
And what's more, Republicans clinched both the House and the Senate, giving Trump full control of the federal government with majorities in Congress, the White House, and a very favorable Supreme Court.
Now, I want to touch on this because you see this every 4 years. In 2020, Joe Biden did the same thing. You saw Joe Biden won not only the presidency, but the Democrats flipped the Senate and managed to keep the House after a very contentious vote in Georgia. This was a very close election back in 2020. And the fact that the Democrats managed to win all three chambers of power was in itself historic, especially considering that Trump at the time was a one-term president then, and the incumbent generally has an advantage. We're going to go through these cycles continuously, and hopefully when everything continues as normal, you're going to see something similar happen in the next election. But he is not trying to engage in that nuance. He is going for dramatic clickbait. That's all he wants, is he wants to engage you on an emotional level so he can manipulate the narrative.
Meanwhile, the political left seems to be in disarray. Key constituencies like Black,
He ain't wrong.
Hispanic, young men, and working class voters actually shifted pretty hard to Trump.
And they did. And I cannot deny this fact. No one can deny this fact. And that's the entire reason that I am trying to start this channel and begin engaging conversation with folks. Because, yes, there was a large shift to the right in many traditionally left-leaning candidates, or populations, I should say. What does that mean, though? Do these people believe in the policies of Donald J. Trump? Are they engaged in what he plans to do politically? Or did they vote for change's sake? We don't know the motive of every single voter. I would argue a particular way, but this gentleman is not going to engage in that conversation. He's going to paint a narrative.
He won the largest share of minority voters for a Republican in over 6 decades, and his decisive win signals the start of what it looks like a new political realignment.
You can't tell that from a single election. This election was close, all things considered. Still is. Republicans got majority of the House by a handful of seats, the smallest margin in, I believe, a decade, at the very least. You cannot get a trend based off of that. As a prime example, I will paint you to the 1980 election of Ronald Reagan, in which the only state, I do believe it was his re-election. Let's look it up real quick. Excuse me, I believe it was the 1984 presidential election, Ronald Reagan's re-election, in which the only state that voted Democrat was Minnesota. This was a blowout election for the president, most certainly. Definitely largest in a generation. But acknowledging that fact doesn't drive media engagement. So we have to make Trump end all be all. Let's return to our gentleman, see what else he has to say.
So, how did the U.S. go from this map in 2020 to this one in 2024? And how could Trump pull off something that was once thought impossible? Well, oddly...
Now, I want to give credit where credit's sake. The flipping of every single swing state towards Trump is indeed historic, and it needs to be acknowledged. Something did happen this election that caused it. Now, he'll never bring this up, but what I want to mention is that about 80% of first-time voters voted for Donald Trump. But you saw in these swing states, with the exception of Pennsylvania, the Democrat won in every single swing state that Kamala Harris lost. To provide a source for my facts, as we can see, Kamala Harris lost Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, as well as Nevada. In every single swing state, the Democratic senator won. What does that tell you? That tells you is that many people voted either for Donald Trump and then blue candidates down the line, or some folks went in, voted only for Donald Trump, and then left the Senate and everything else blank. If we were to take this at face value, we would show that people want a country not governed by a single party. At face value, of course. But let our gentleman continue again.
Enough, the answer lies in a pattern that has been brewing for almost a decade. In 2016, after Hillary Clinton's shock defeat to Trump, many Democrats believed that it was just a fluke. It was a quirk of the Electoral College that didn't actually reflect the true will of the people. They thought the demographic change would inevitably hand them victory in future elections, and that their coalition of the ascendant would eventually sweep Republicans out of power for good.
Now, notice when he talks about sweeping Republicans out of power for good, he mentions only the 2016 election and how that was apparently an anomaly. Completely glosses over the 2020 election, in which something similar happened to what's happened now. Cherry picking. This is called cherry picking. Look at this, ignore everything else in between.
Fast forward to 2024, and we see that the opposite seems to be happening. Rather than building a new, dominant majority, the left have actually alienated huge segments of their own base.
That right there. Did you see what he did? Talking about the Democratic Party, their failures, how they expected the election to go, and then he shifted to the left. What is the left? Is the left the crazy liberals we see online? Is the left myself, who I tend to consider somewhat left of center, but I don't engage in this crazy rhetoric he's about to explain? What is the left?
Their policies have driven away key voting blocks that once made up the backbone of their party. Instead of addressing...
He mentions the policies of the left. And I will ask again, what policies is he discussing? He doesn't bring up anything specific. He'll give the general waving hands of talking points that the right will speak on regularly. But what policies is he talking about? What did Joe Biden pass in his Congress and his legislation and his executive orders? that force people to go right.
The core concerns of these voters, the left spent the last 8 years doubling down on lecturing the American people about
I'll let him finish this one, actually.
how anyone who didn't agree with them must be a racist, a sexist, a misogynist, or a bigot.
Now, I would like to know, in Kamala Harris's campaign, at what point did she turn to you, the American people, and say you are a racist, sexist bigot? But of course, people are going to say, of course Kamala Harris called us stupid. Well, I like this clip from her Fox News interview, and this lovely channel must see MLB highlights. I'm sure they're very politically active. It provides us a good example of how the right wing will manipulate you with quick clips.
Listen, are they stupid? What
God,
is it?
I would never say that about the American people.
Meanwhile,
What else do we know about this population, 18 through 24? They are stupid.
And there we go. The continual misinformation the right wing puts out. Kamala Harris just called 18 through 24-year-olds stupid. No full context for that clip. Now, the first clip you saw was from the Fox News interview, in which the interviewer, Fox News anchor, leans into Kamala Harris and asks her, if Donald Trump is so dangerous, why do so many people support him? Are they misinformed or stupid? Trying to get some type of clip out of Kamala Harris to agree with him that the American people are stupid. And Kamala Harris, somewhat wisely, says, no, I would never say that about the American people. But then they switch, and the right wing has talked about this clip a lot, because that's the reason I knew it at the top of my head, is that Kamala Harris then has a briefing, a speech, I forget exactly where this happened or when it happened, in which she calls 18 through 24-year-olds stupid. Now, give me a second. Let's pull up the full clip.
At 18 through 24. When I was at Howard University and we were in college, we were 18 through 24, and you know what we were called? College kids. But when you turn 18 and you're in the system, you are considered an adult, period, without any regard to the fact that that is the very phase of life in which we have invested billions of dollars in colleges and universities, knowing that is the prime phase of life during which we mold and shape and direct someone to become a productive adult. What's the other thing we know about this population? And it's a specific phase of life. Remember, age is more than a chronological fact. What else do we know about this population, 18 through 24? They are stupid. That is why we put them in dormitories, and they have a resident assistant. They make really bad decisions. So we focused on that age population.
Now, Kamala Harris is going to go on to address how lower age perpetrators of crimes are often put into, or she is trying to make it more likely for them to go into rehabilitation programs and simply to enter the criminal justice system and go to jail and return to that crime to pipeline justice. But again, it's it's a long story that we could watch this entire 30-minute speech to talk about. But in the context of this speech, she makes a comment that is intended to be mostly humorous, calling kids stupid. Like, I ain't ever heard an adult older than me say the same damn thing. Like, I ain't called kids younger than me that I supervise or work with on a daily basis. Damn, you got some stupid kids, ain't you? That's a normal thing to say. It's not controversial that kids of a younger age or demographic, 18, 24, don't always make the best decisions. And we see that in every single statistic regarding criminal justice, in which people of a younger age are more likely to commit crimes and sometimes make bad decisions. Your insurance rate goes down after the age of 25 because you are no longer considered a kid who makes reckless, dangerous decisions. It's not that controversial, but this is Kamala Harris saying that you, the Republican conservative voter, are stupid. That is their clip for it. That is their evidence presentation, the whole hook, line, and sinker. That she thinks you're stupid because she's talking about the nuance policy in regards to younger criminals and getting them back and rehabilitated rather than simply punished in the criminal justice system. But let's talk about our gentleman here who does not provide that evidence or anything of that matter that I just tried to provide context for the situation. But let's give him a chance to finish his 4-minute video.
They've pushed an aggressive cultural agenda that included open borders, radical gender ideology, even in the classroom, and divisive racial politics that framed half the country as the enemy. They presided over a crime wave in major cities fueled by defund the police rhetoric and
And again, I ask, what policies, laws, bills, executive orders did Joe Biden or Kamala Harris propose, pass, or use in order to do this? They don't say. Now, if you recall the 2020 election, Joe Biden specifically stated he was not for defund the police.
When asked about the issue, presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden told CBS News he does not think police should be defunded. The former vice president.
Perhaps he passed a law and pursued some sort of policy that said he should defund the police and may have lied during the campaign. Now, I would love for somebody to provide me that. In fact, if you happen to have a source on that, put a link of it down in the comments below. We'll take a look at it.
policies that prioritized ideological purity over public safety. And rather than addressing the economic anxiety brought on by inflation, soaring housing costs, and stagnant wages, they touted macroeconomic figures that meant nothing to the average American struggling to buy groceries or fill up their gas tank.
This is the one point that I fully concede he is correct on. This is the issue with political parties pushing facts and numbers and not addressing people directly. However, the failure is also on individuals such as him on not explaining the nuances of the problems we face. Could Joe Biden have done better? Absolutely. In fact, I think the Democrats fail repeatedly on getting the messages out to the American people. And that is the thing that Donald Trump has excelled in. But I have news for you folks. This gentleman, Donald Trump, the conservatives are lying to you. Because Donald Trump did the same thing when he was president. All he did was talk about the macroeconomic situation. Stock market's doing great. Everything's doing great. Gas prices are down, without any semblance of what was actually happening. I have had my conservative friends look me dead in the eye and say, well, I like Donald Trump because in 2020 gas prices were a bit lower. And I ask, what did Donald Trump do to get that? All of them look at me dumbfounded, confused. Don't know why. No one can provide the evidence of what he did, but they'll point to something happening regardless of him, forgetting about things such as COVID, supply lines down, the fact that nobody was driving in 2020 as to why gas prices were historically low. And if I were to show you gas prices, in fact, I think I will. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I love facts. So if we look 2024, gas prices about November, about $3.17, 18 cents per the gallon. They peaked around, look at that, June 2022, about $5 per the gallon. Very expensive. This is about where that media manipulation got in, and we all talk about higher gas prices. We go back down to their lowest point in the last few years, about May 2020. Gas prices are about $1.96. Now, what was happening in May 2020? We were dealing with COVID. People weren't driving. Of course, gas prices are going to get down. Barrels were being sold in the negatives because they couldn't store the facilities because they weren't being used because nobody was driving. But let's look, perhaps Donald Trump did something else. So let's go back to when they were also at their lowest, at the end of February 2016. Interesting. I do believe February 2016, Barack Obama was president. And they, of course, fluctuate throughout all. And you can see there was another dip in 2019, but does not reach that low that was in February 2016 of $1.87. These problems are complicated. They require nuance. Joe Biden is not responsible for the gas price increasing. That was due to normal economic factors. Now, one could argue he's also not responsible for the gas prices going back down. However, if you are knowledgeable in the subject, you can point to certain instances and policies that he did that would contribute to gas prices going down. I will provide one example for brevity's sake. At the height of gas prices going up, when Russia invaded Ukraine, that's why they went up about 2020, it caused gas prices around the world to go up. Russia was a major supplier that now was going to be cut off from all fuel prices, from selling their fuel overseas, which caused prices around the globe to increase. All right? What happened that Joe Biden did to help lower those costs was he released barrels of oil from the strategic reserve. released thousands of barrels to help offset the rising cost. After the cost had gone down and leveled out a bit, he then proceeded to restock the reserve with more barrels of oil, buying it at the market price. That technically netted the government a small profit. Those were the policies he initiated that did have a direct effect on our gas prices. There is a cause and effect for everything. Now, sometimes that cause and effect comes from things outside of the government's control, natural disaster. But the policies that come up after the fact are what's important.
Reliably voted Democrat felt abandoned by the party. In short, the left fundamentally misunderstood the electorate in this election. They alienated key constituencies with their ideological rigidity and fostered, rather than addressed, deep cultural and economic divides that many Americans are simply exhausted by.
We are exhausted by it. Every single one of us. I'm exhausted. What has the right done to address those cultural divisions? Nothing. Now, at this point, when I was watching the video for the first time, I went ahead and went down to the comment section because I like to see what folks are saying. And it really was an eye-opener. I never forget about how I became a right-winger. Once on Facebook, I asked, why is it good to pay high taxes? And some leftists called me a racist. Real quick. My ex-girlfriend is the one that pushed me to being right-wing. When we first met, we were long distance and never talked about politics. But then after I moved to be near her, that's when it started. Out of nowhere. She just started calling me racist, homophobic, all this leftist nonsense. It got so bad to tell her that she could just either stop it or we didn't need to be together. She calmed down after that, but it never really went away, and we butted heads over it all the way till we broke up. America's had enough of the bullshit. This man voted for Donald Trump because his girlfriend broke up with him, and he had a bad relationship. We are feeding into an ecosystem that is determined to make things like this reflect every single Democratic politician. That is not what's happening. This is an illusion made online. I don't know this individual. I can't even determine if he's real. But I'm going to let you know, if somebody is mean to you, I'm sorry about that. You don't deserve to be yelled at or called a racist. If somebody is rude to you or causes you a bad day, that is a shame. And that person should take a deep look on themselves and figure out why they are projecting such insecurities on other people. None of these comments speak to anything Kamala Harris said, did, or any actions that the government has done under Democratic control for the past 4 years. Not a single one. They are distracting you once again. Now, I would love to sit here and engage in logical policy discussions. We can discuss how tariffs work, how other things work, but we can't do that. If I have to explain, that's great. Sorry that happened to you. Your girlfriend sounds like a jerk. But I'm not voting for your ex-girlfriend. This gentleman in the video, about 4 minutes, I have had to spend God knows how long expanding upon what he said. You cannot boil down the complex situations we have to a single catchphrase, a 4-minute video, or anything else. You have to better explain and communicate with people. Anything else is dishonest and lying. Watch this space. We're all in it together.